Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Uh, Respected Chairperson, distinguished panelists, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I should join my voice to thank the IDSA, and particularly Dr. Humayun Kabir, DG, and his very competent staff for inviting me and also extending a very I would say, very warm hospitality during our stay here for the last 2 days, and I'm looking forward to enjoying more here. As you can see, I have just changed the title a little bit, so forgive me for the confusion, what you have in the document and what you see on the screen. Since I've been given 20 minutes maximum, so I'll try to squeeze my presentation as much as I can. And before I go to the slides, let me tell you what the themes that I try to build up on. Here we have just heard about the nature of state. Yes, that is a very important element. And to me, it's not only the system of governance, for example, parliamentary system, presidential system, federation, confederation. But I want to go a little bit down from my experience in 1971 as a freedom fighter. What I saw then was that Bangladesh is basically a social state. It is the people who make the difference. Why I'm saying so? While we were fighting on the ground, honestly, the existence of both Pakistan government and the Bangladesh government was at best tenuous because they were all boxed. Bangladesh government was not on the ground. Pakistan government was foxholed in different places. So it was the people who really determined the outcome in a sense. Yes, I know one can argue that it is the military actions and so on and so forth, but at the end of the analysis is the people who really drove the process, and then other factors fell into the ground. And if the people are not in line, or if they didn't demand that or work for that, I think the outcome could have been different. So that is one element. And I would argue here that Bangladesh is essentially a state which is driven by society. So I call it a social state. So that's the point number one. And the point number two is that again comes out from our 71 days, our liberation war. India and Bangladesh, we have many common aspirations. A democratic governance, for example, economic emancipation, living together in peace, maintaining regional security. So these are our common aspirations on which we need to build up. The third area is we have heard here, and we know also how the mutual, there was a time perhaps in India, there was a strategic thought that India can, or as has been mentioned by the chair, India didn't bother about the neighborhood, but things have changed now, and it has to be taken into account that we are living in a different kind of era where interdependence or mutual dependence is a factor that will determine the outcome. So that's the third point that I want to emphasize here. The fourth one is bilateral relationship is important, but bilateral relationship is not now an end in itself. It is now going much beyond that. So we should have a strategic vision, as has been mentioned by Diane before me, that, if we do not have a larger vision, then we run into competition, we run into bad blood, into mistrust. So the kind of world that we are living, and if we assume that we are getting increasingly interdependent, then we have to find out how we can eliminate the edges, sharp edges, and find out a reasonably workable environment for advancing our common interest. And the last point I would say, for that, we need to be creative, number one, and we have to have a collaborative kind of framework so that everybody can participate. And Professor Muni has been arguing this, that this is particularly required where the relationship in the system is asymmetric. So that is, again, another point, collaborative framework so that everybody can participate, share the benefit, and be a stakeholder, positive stakeholder in the process. Parameters between Bangladesh and India, recent developments, and some of the challenges, and then way forward. I will not spend much time here on this introduction. We have already heard about that. I'll go to the next slide, how Bangladesh looks at itself. Couple of things we have to understand. The whole of South Asia was under colonial rule. We have a sense of deprivation. But Bangladesh had a layered sense of deprivation. For example, first it was the Hindu jamindars who was the dominant factor in our society, and then came the British, and then Pakistan regime. So we had a couple of layers of sense of developing the sense of deprivation and sense of, to some extent, victimization also. And Bangladeshi people responded, if we look at the history, in different phases in mobilizing themselves against that kind of situation and try to bring some balance. And also Bangladeshis didn't hesitate to reach out to other friends, even sometimes in the region, sometimes beyond. So we were always preferring or uncomfortable about a hierarchical structure because of our social experience, because of our historical experience. So we preferred a kind of horizontal kind of environment, collaborative framework. So that comes out of our historical experience, and also during Liberation War, as I have mentioned, that it was a really social mobilization, social war. All the people participated, and that really made the difference. So we have a preference for working on a kind of horizontal environment and collaborative environment instead of hierarchical environment. So these are some of the things that are really driving or when we look at the world, we look at it from that kind of perspective. Now, in terms of perception parameters, these are all we know, but I'll try to just give some interpretation to that. Geography is number one factor, and Bangladesh has 4,000 kilometers plus borders with India. We have maritime boundary with India, and practically we are surrounded by India. India is on our three sides, and that impacts on our self-perception, identity formation, and collective outlook and policy preferences. I don't need any explanation on that, perhaps. Now, how our identity process is advancing. The defining moment, as I have mentioned, is the War of Liberation in 1971. This was, for us, the first time we have become independent. So you understand, and even today, it vibrates so lively, vibrantly in our society that we are still in that kind of ferment from the Liberation War, and war is a great mobilizer and leveler also. So that has seen a deep impact on any society, let alone Bangladesh. So we also had that, and that has created some kind of sense about ourselves, given some identity to us. And two factors have contributed in Bangladeshi identity formation. One is the culture, another is the religion. Now, yes, we are predominantly a cultural state. Bangladesh is, that's the driver for us, and we believe that that is our strength. But at the same time, the religion remains a factor, it plays some role, and we always work on keeping a fine balance between these two things. It's difficult to separate people on these two elements. These two elements are combined in every person in Bangladesh. So we have two legs to work on our identity, and whenever the balance has been disrupted, we felt the problem. So we believe that this balance should be maintained, and because of the governance deficit, sometimes we see marginal elements coming or making noises. And this is not only Bangladesh, whole of South Asia has the experience of that kind of situation. Now, power setting. How do you look at the power setting? South Asia is definitely, we know it's asymmetric, but with India we have got a kind of interesting and unique relationship. What is that? India was a partner in our Liberation War. We were friends, deeply bound by our common objective. And even after independence, India helped us, and we gratefully acknowledge that. And what I say, and that would be one of the major thrust of my presentation today, is that that was the only time when government of India, people of India, government of Bangladesh, and people of Bangladesh, we were aligned on the same line. That was the only time we found. We trusted what India said. Indians trusted what we said. So that was the bond that we built up that time. And I call it a social compact. It was not relationship between two states. It was a relationship between two societies. And the government worked as a kind of, you can say, catalyzer. So that's what happened. But after independence, when we saw that India was trying to advance its statist approach, then the situation, we went back to two states, and the fissure starts developing. And thereafter, we know how the history has meandered through ups and downs. Policy initiatives, size, India has got its own self-image. Accordingly, India has developed its policies about the neighborhood. And generally, we have seen that India prefers bilateralism. But as against that, Bangladesh believes that bilateralism has got its limitations, and we know what, for the last 60 years, what has happened. And we preferred that let us build up something collaborative and participatory, perhaps. And SAARC was a possible format, although we know the SAARC suffered from different deficiencies. In recent years, Bangladesh tried to give a new energy into the model, some of the models that we saw which were not working, to introduce a new kind of model. The last one is in India as an economic power. We have remained a close economic partner since our independence. Bangladesh now India is the second largest import source after China for Bangladesh, and also a big market for India. Bangladesh, 160 million people, is a big market. And India, on its part, has recently allowed 98% of our products duty-free to the Indian market, but tariff, non-tariff and para-tariff barriers are still there, and we need to work on them. And as on the whole, Bangladesh views positively the rise of India as an economic power. I mean, there's a consensus on that in Bangladesh. We see new opportunities on both sides, and I think it would be helpful if we really capitalize on this and build up something for our common share and common advancement. Recent development, I'll briefly touch on that. Bangladesh made two major strategic concessions to India, almost unilaterally. One is that India has been requesting for access to Northeast through Bangladesh. We had, since 1972, water transit and trade and transit protocol. That was partially effective, so India was asking for more. And this is the first time in 2010 that Bangladesh has agreed to give India access through several means. And then Bangladesh also dealt very firmly the extremist elements, which had a positive impact on our internal development as well as benefited India, for example. And in Bangladesh also collaborated with India during the last few years on other common security threats. And in Bangladesh also particularly supported Indian aspiration for larger aspirations for regional and global role. For example, Bangladesh has supported India as a permanent member of the Security Council. I mean, that's one of the instances of how far Bangladesh had gone to support Indian aspirations in the global format. India also responded. It steadfastly supported the government of Sheikh Hasina. We signed a protocol to implement LBA, Land Boundary Agreement of 1974, and remember that has not been ratified so long. And India extended credit line 1 billion and also relaxed the visa to improve the people-to-people contact. And also India agreed agreed on utilization of common resources, including water on a common basin-wise basis, and also opened this market. So we see both sides coming together. Now, what are the impact of that, or what were the impacts? But in Bangladesh, most of the political parties, civil society, media very strongly supported that initiative. And what is interesting is we are encouraged by the fact that in India also we see a lot of support for this kind of initiatives. So we are happy that after a kind of at certain point benign neglect about Bangladesh, at certain point to some adversarial reactions, Bangladesh is now getting a kind of objective review in India. That's a positive thing. But having said that, we are seeing that some bumps are coming along, and somehow I will here talk about very briefly some of the bumps that we are seeing. One is the conceptual confusion we have seen here, and I'm sure all of us are aware that it looks like that Indian policy looks or lacks creativity and consistency. That is one sense, because whenever Bangladesh took the initiative to support India, we naturally expected that India should also take similar initiatives. And what we found is that no, India was still pursuing its own interest, while the Bangladeshi interest remained to some extent pending. And two instances I will give. While India was modifying or requested, both sides modified the water transit agreement, India took certain initiatives which really was not liked, because it looked like that India was in a haste. They want to achieve something very quickly. And they were not sensitive about some of the concerns that the people have, such as the environmental concerns, such as the infrastructure deficiencies, and so on and so forth. And of late, when a joint venture project between Bangladesh and India was being taken up at Rampal for an electricity plant, India completely ignored the local and Bangladeshi national concerns about the environmental impact of a huge power plant near Sundarbans. So people are thinking that Indians are not taking much interest. They are looking at the interest of the project, maybe the business people, or it's not business, this is a private sector, although, but blessings of the government is there. So people are thinking that Indians are not taking much attention or paying much attention to the sensitivities of the people of Bangladesh. Bangladesh, on the other hand, here delivered on the security front, but India somehow failed to deliver on the promises that it committed to Bangladesh. With regard to engagement with the stakeholders in Bangladesh, we saw mixed pictures. So the result was also mixed. And there was frustration that India somehow could not capitalize on the opportunities that was created by the courageous initiatives of the Bangladesh government. Indian activism in SAARC. Bangladesh is very deeply committed to SAARC, and Bangladesh actually promoted the idea, and we are still strongly committed, but we are not very sure about how Indians are looking at it. We understand that India is now more active in SAARC, but people are not very sure about where India could fit into that, or how India should participate in the SAARC process, or how it should energize that. Sub-regional cooperation is the new idea that is around the corner now for the last few years. There are debates on that. I will not go into that. But I think overall Bangladesh supports that idea, and people believe that sub-regional cooperation could perhaps be a block on which we can build up regional cooperation down the line. Another area where I think we have heard also this morning from the chair, information flow is really skewed. Two areas I will focus. One is that Indo-Bangladesh relationship is making a transition to a new kind of phase. Neither Bangladesh government nor Indian government has really explained these things clearly to the people. So in India as well as in Bangladesh, people have questions which they don't get the answers for. So that is where I think this is as I said, it's a transitional phase. People need to be fed properly, explained what is the policy framework, and if they have any questions, that should be properly answered. So when there is no answer or there is a gap, some other elements try to fill that gap. Another issue that comes up quite frequently in Bangladesh is that in Bangladesh, we watch Indian television every evening. I can tell you housewives in Bangladesh are glued to these soap operas, cinema, movies from India, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, not one Bangladeshi channel is allowed to telecast in India. So we think unless the people have communication flow, how they will know what is happening in Bangladesh? Media, yes, media can positively, negatively frame, but I think information flow should be there. Socialization gap, I think some allusion has been made here. In our textbooks, in our family, academia, we don't have any information about our neighborhood practically. So whatever we have, we build upon innuendos, we build upon the stray information that we receive. So it is important that we build up a socialization process so that we are on the same page, at least. Domestic dimension, I'll just very quickly pass on. The coordination problem in India, we are seeing that the political leaders make some commitments and on the field those are not implemented. And we have our problems in Bangladesh as well. For example, government says something or says different things and people get confused. And in Bangladesh, I think one of the problems that India is now suffering is that as the government popularity is now going down, somehow India is also getting into that loop, and I think that creates public negativity. Way forward, Bangladesh and India relationship, we have these are some of these conditions that I have explained, compulsions and attractions both. Now, how do we do that? We need to build up a collaborative and forward-looking framework for continuing our relationship. That is not there. We have the building blocks, but not a real framework. Favorable public opinion has, during the last few years, we have seen strong tailwind, as I call it, in favor of the policies that we are having. And look at some of these areas, convergence areas, where I can see the desire for continued stability and strengthening of democratic governance, shared economic aspiration, partnership, exploring regional, sub-regional, and inter-regional objectives, and so on and so forth. And we could perhaps give some visibility to our relationship if we can institutionalize high-level interactions between our leadership. Partnership economy, India is now trying to give more input into its policy from the economic side, and I think that should be strengthened, and that could be one of the soft power that India could utilize, and Bangladesh should be very happy to be a partner of that. People-to-people connections, that needs to be improved further. Some progress has been achieved, but more needs to be done, including, as I said, building up common discourse, common socialization process, for example. A roadmap. We have many areas unresolved. We can build up a roadmap based on short-term, medium, and long-term perspective, and that would perhaps give some direction to our relationship. Just to conclude, we have, as I said, this is a unique kind of relationship in the sense that India needs Bangladesh to develop its own nation. Likewise, we need Indian support to build up our nation. So we have very delicately balanced interrelationship that needs to be explored. And we have our complementarities, and we should continue to build up. And Bangladesh would be very happy to be a partner in this process under a creative, collaborative, and sustainable framework. We have to understand the relationship has to be sustainable. Small patches of good relationship may not be good enough. So with these things, and I would be very happy to hear from the very distinguished audience, and would be happy to answer any questions if you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Kabir. I think you have thrown on the table both nuances and insights of how Bangladesh looks at India. I'm sure we will all take note of it, and probably an interaction would help improve both the sides in terms of understanding each other. Pratyush. Yes.
I want to begin with some preliminaries. I will first ask Dr. Muni to warn me when my 15 minutes are over, and if I'm not done by that, I will stop